I'm very happy to see so many people here, and I am acutely aware that I am the only thing standing between you and Sophia Ho, so I will be very brief. You all, I need the glasses. On your chair, you all got a piece of paper, and I know that as soon as somebody picks something up off their chair, they read it, and I'm so glad to have seen so many people reading it. And it is a copy of our presentation about We Need Your Help. And there's something for everyone here, literally. I'll just go through the general categories. Communications. I notice a lot of people talking here. You're very good at that. And this is also an idea category. Very often when I come to these meetings, someone says, you know what would be great too? I know this woman or I know this guy who. So that's the kind of person who could volunteer once or twice in communications. Let us know about somebody who you'd like to recruit or for us to recruit as a speaker. Introduce a monthly program. It's really not difficult. In fact, you can, if you flub it, Ed will edit you right out, so don't worry about it. And interviewing future speakers is also quite easy. You may do it once, you may do it several times. A guest article, a little bit of an interesting thing you found on the web for veterans, or your musings on something about Veterans Affairs. Seek opportunity to increase outreach. We had a meeting here over the summer where we brainstormed ideas of how to get more folks on our listserv, mailing list, how to get more folks interested in our presentations. And so if you're an idea person like that, we'd love to have new ideas, new refreshing ways of looking at things, and to provide backup sending emails through our listserv. That's Ed. Ed would know more about that than I. In member services, which has my name next to it at the bottom of your sheet, what's really nice here is that it's a real people-to-people kind of volunteer opportunity. Once or several times to drive someone to a monthly presentation. That would be really neat because you know and I know that there are folks out there who would love to get here but can't. So that's an opportunity. Picking up and return coffee is great because you also get all the coffee you want to drink. If you serve as a greeter, you get first crack at the goodies. I was a greeter today, and I must say the chocolate chips are great, especially first-time guests, because as you know, if you've been a first-time guest here, you've walked in and you're like, all these folks seem to know each other, and where do I sit? So to have someone else there at the door saying, hi, I'm Margaret, have a seat over there. Welcome. You can do it once. You can do it every time, as often as you want. And a one-time project of converting our current member listserv to a database. I know there are people out here who know Access Database. I know there are. So if you can help with that project, that's great. And in meeting production and website, that's to assist Ed. A lot of neat things go on in that booth back there. And Ed can use help occasionally. So that can be fun. And in terms of the website, suggest or find or produce new content. And that's not that difficult. If you're trolling the web like a lot of us do, you find suddenly there are all sorts of very interesting things out there. For example, there's now a group that does live virtual tours, and for people with disabilities, including a special emphasis on veterans. So what they do is they plan a time, and the veteran gets on the web, and it's interactive, and the person running it has a camera on their hat, and the veteran is with them going down the rapids, for instance. I mean, there are a lot of very, very cool things out there that could be linked from our website. So if you've seen those things, let Ed know. And regular website updating and maintenance is not as difficult as it seems. It's easier than cleaning the bathroom, really. So if you can help Ed with that once or twice or 3 times, that would be great. So now, without further ado, let's have our presentation with Sophia Ho.
We have 8 people standing here, which means we have 93 people. And I would ask that young man in the corner, does that fan work? It's going to get hot in here. Well, if you can plug that in at some point. And then people standing along the back, Walter, Bill, would you? borrow, appropriate, whatever, some chairs from that room across the hallway. We need about 5 or 6 more chairs. Speaking of helping, we're working on the chairs. Thank you. There's our chair, committee chair.
Okay. I'll start with our introduction, and hopefully by the time I finish, everybody will have a seat. We certainly don't want, it's great to have standing room only, but we'd much rather have everybody seated. We have 1 seat available. Yeah, if you're sitting next to an empty seat, could you raise your hand? All right, there's a seat there for someone. Don't all rush at once. Okay. Well, I think you know already that our speaker, Sophia Ho, is a very well-known lady in Lexington. She refers to herself as a full-time volunteer for the town of Lexington. She's been especially active in the Chinese American Association of Lexington, and we welcome a number of members of that group here today. Delighted to have you all with us. I believe Sophia is also a loyal and generous supporter of this library. Now, there are many of us who know Sophia, but a lot fewer know about her childhood. Sophia did not have the peaceful upbringing of a typical American. She spent her girlhood in China while it was being torn apart by war and factions on all sides. On one side were Chiang Kai-shek and his nationalist army trying to unite the country. On the other side were Mao Zedong and the communists fighting for control of China. And in between were powerful warlords who shifted their loyalties back and forth. Into this mix, in the mid-30s, thundered the Japanese, invading China in a war that lasted 8 years. 6 years later, China got caught up in World War II. As the daughter of a general in Chiang Kai-shek's army, Sophia experienced this turmoil up close and personal. Her story is compelling, made even more so by the extraordinary photographs that she will show. Prepare to hear a remarkable story as we welcome Sophia Ho.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can back people hear me? Hello? Can you hear me now? Oh yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for coming this afternoon. First, I'd like to thank the Lexington Veterans Association for asking me to be here. Bill asked me if I know some World II veterans, Chinese. I say no, they all passed strong. But then we start talking, and he thought it might be interesting for me to come and talk to people about my growing up in China during the war. And after that, I've met many committee members. I find them most supportive, kind, friendly, and I am so glad to have befriended all these great people. Childhood memories. In China, the war was always called the War of Resistance against Japanese. All of you who grew up then will remember that. China and the United States are similar in sizes and in latitudes, but that's about it. America is blessed with two oceans on each side, cousin Canada in the north, and Mexico. But China has Russia, the big Russia in the north, and Japan hovering on the east. And they all want to come to China. And the United States is young, vibrant, rich. China is old, poor, war-torn. It's constant war, and especially in the past 2 centuries, the foreigners came in. So Qing dynasty was really in sad shape. China in 1912. Dr. San Yixian, by the way, he was indeed a medical doctor. He led his comrades and overthrew Qing dynasty, established the Republic of China. But that is not to say China was united. It was far from being united. The warlords all over the country. By the way, Manchuria is a name known to the world. But in China, we always call it Northeast. Nobody refers it to as Manchuria because that's a Japanese name given by the Japanese. So the warlords over there, here's northwest, southwest, and southeast. So in 1926, Chiang Kai-shek and his Nationalist Party started Northern Expedition, meaning the army went up north, sort of in 2 years, sort of united China, but still the warlords had a lot to say themselves. In 1901, this is a picture of Baudi Military Academy. It's like the West Point of this country. It's the oldest one. It was established actually during the Qing dynasty, but it was very informal. It's like an elementary school for boys and that. It was not until later on it moved to Baoding. Baoding is a city south of Beijing, and it became a formal military school. Unfortunately, he only graduated 9 classes. My father graduated the 8th class. A year after he graduated from Baoding, the school closed. This is a picture of my father, but this is way afterwards, not as he first graduated, and my mother. But that's the only picture of them and my father in uniform. After Baoding Military School was closed, Chiang Kai-shek, with great help from the Russians, established another military school called Huangpu Military School. Huangpu is in the south, sort of northeast of Hong Kong, in Canton province. At that time, they had Russian teachers, Russian technology, Russian money, so they relied heavily on the Russians. And this is another picture of the campus. Huangpu Military School, Wuhan Division. Huangpu is the main campus. It's like UMass Boston, or UMass Amherst. But there are other campuses. One is in Wuhan. Wuhan is somewhere in the middle of China. And that is school my mother went to. At that time, my mother measured 5'5", and she was considered very tall. So she never graduated because she met my father. So in 1947, after the war, she had a uniform made for herself, just want to have a picture to see how she would like if she would become a general. She did not become a general. She became a general of a general. And I assure you, my mother would make a great, great general. My father graduated in 1924, and he was made a major general when he was 37. 10 years later, at 47, he was promoted to lieutenant general, 2 stars. How the war affects the people. When there's a war, There are areas that's not occupied by the Japanese. But if you live in an important large city, you get bombed. But you're not disturbed. You didn't have to run away or anything. Government employees, they did take care of them, and they helped them to escape. Then the government also moved universities, factories to places that was not occupied by the Japanese. Then there's the poor, uninformed people. They didn't know what was going on, China being large, and they didn't know anything. Some, until they heard the cannons or the shots, they start to run. And that is very sad because you don't run too far. You get killed on the road. And you just follow the move of people and you do your best. The last category is people living in the foreign concessions. During the Qing dynasty, there were wars and China lost. What they did was they say, all right, France, you can occupy this part of the city, consider that's a French territory. So we had French concessions, English concessions, German concessions in Qingdao, and in Tianjin there are French concessions. If you live in that area, the Japanese wouldn't come in because that is not China. Japanese occupied almost more than 1/3 of China on the coast, thus blocking the supplies, foreign aid from coming in. That's why later on there was a Burma road to fly supplies into China. People thought that the Sino-Japanese War started in 1937, but it was way before that, in 1931. At that time, in northeastern China, there were Russian influence and Japanese influence. In fact, the Russo-Japanese War were fought on Chinese territory. Each one wanted a piece of China. So in 1931, some Chinese patriots blew up a railroad owned by the Japanese. Japanese took that as an excuse, killed the Chinese, and totally took over northeastern part of China. And that happened on September 18th. People from the northeast would never forget September 18th, because that was the day the Japanese occupied the northeast. And this is a picture of Japanese soldiers marching into Shenyang. Shenyang, it was a big city in the northeast. Japanese occupation. In 1934, as Linda said, there was Communist Party. Chiang Kai-shek did not like any competitions. So he wanted to eliminate the Communist Party. The communists originated somewhere here. So Chiang Kai-shek's army chased them all the way through. This is 6,000 miles. It's called the Long March. It began with 80,000 people. A year later, it ended with 8,000 only. But they reached Yan'an. Yan'an is a little bit north of Xi'an, where the terracotta is. And they get established there. The communists established there. Marco Polo Bridge, I don't know who gave the name to that bridge, but in Chinese it's called Lu Go Bridge. It's a beautiful bridge just outside of Beijing. That's where the other incidents happened. The bridge is known for the lions. You have a better picture of them, and there are no two are alike. Each one is different. Some with cups, some with not, some with just one cup. You see, this is a close-up. This is my journey. I was born in 1935 in Kaifeng, right there. Kaifeng was an old capital of Song Dynasty, and also is known for the Kaifeng Jews. Jewish people settled there. Funny, they don't look Jewish. You see, synagogue? And these are models of the Chinese synagogues. This was in Israel. I have to mention Nanking Massacre. The pictures are too gruesome. I cannot bear it. This is a memorial later on erected by people. The Japanese killed 300,000 Chinese people. 20 years ago, I went to Newton here to a lecture given by a Caucasian professor. And he started his lecture by saying, why did the Japanese kill the Chinese? He answered himself, because they can. For no reason. 80,000 women, no, not women, girls, grandmas were raped. The Japanese admitted to the figure of 40,000. Some said it never happened, but it did, and because they could. This picture, I want you to point out, to look at what the soldier's wearing. It looks like he probably is not wearing anything. But actually, these are called straw shoes. Later on, you can take a look at these. I borrowed a pair, straw shoes. The soldiers wore these winter and summer. They fought. They ran for their lives in these things. A friend here in Lexington heard about that I was looking for straw shoes. He said, I'll make you a pair. I said, but I can't find straw. He said, no, you can use rags. So he tore up something, and he actually made one. And he said, believe me, they don't fall off. You look like it wouldn't hang on your feet, right? But they don't fall off. So these are, as I said, China was poor, and they were ill-equipped, ill-disciplined, ill-trained, and I would add ill-clothed and ill-fed. It was just a very bad, sad situation. Now, I was born in Kaifeng in 1935. When I was 37, we already moved south to Hunan. This is the first memory I have of my life. Later on, I told my mother, I said, oh, I remember the flood, because I was on the second floor. I looked down, there was a narrow street, slanted, water was flowing, and I saw a man sitting on a bamboo bed. In China, there were a lot of bamboo beds, and flowing down. That's one picture. Another one was, I was inside the house. I saw a kid using a bathtub. Chinese bathtub is just like a half a barrel, about so big, so deep, made of wood, and you pour water in there. I saw a kid using it as a boat because of the water. Then my mother said, oh, that was in Hunan in 1937. So I know that was my first memory of China. Kaifeng, we went to Hunan. Me and my brother were born in Kaifeng, a year apart. In Hunan, 1937, my brother Joe was born. That was the flood I remember. From then on, we moved on to Guiyang. We moved because of my father's job. He changed a lot. So we moved to Guiyang. What I remember Guiyang is while you're running away, My little brothers could not walk, could not run. So we had servants carrying a stick, a flat pole on the shoulder, a basket in the front, a basket in the back, and the two boys balanced there. That was the only image I have of Guiyang. From Guiyang, we went here to Guilin. Some of you must have heard Guilin. It's such a beautiful place. In Guilin, I remember that we were playing hide and seek. I was probably 4 years old. And Chinese houses have the thresholds. Some could be 6 inches, some could be 14 inches. I couldn't climb over. I fell down, hit my head. I still have the scar here. I cried. Later on, my big half-sister told me that my mother was extremely mad at her. Said, I told you to watch your little sister, and you let her fall. So my sister told me the story. But I remember falling with a bloody head. 1937. That's my half-sister. My mother has 5 children. My brother, born 1932, me, 35, 36, 37. The little one, the baby, was born in 1941, so he's not in the picture yet. And we went to Chongqing. I don't remember arriving in Chongqing. Chiang Kai-shek moved the capital from Nanking to Chongqing. Nanking is on the seacoast. It's somewhere, let's say somewhere like Virginia. But then he moved to Chongqing, which is somewhere in Tennessee or something inside, because he kept on moving. He said, actually, it was his theory was we do not really want to sacrifice our soldiers, our people. So I would trade land for lives, because the Japanese were just too superior, too powerful. And I remember reading somewhere the Japanese general, Araki, said, Japan's mission is to be superior in Asia, and then in the South Seas, and eventually the 4 corners of the world. Japan was very ambitious, so they had to conquer China first. Another picture of us. Oh, I want to point out that my mother was a great knitter. She knit sweaters for all of us. You will see, I will point out that, see, all the things she made for us. Now look at the beautiful outfits we all have, hats and everything. My mother really knit for the whole family. See, my father, my half-brother, half-sister, then the 4 of us. The baby was not born yet. We already moved to Chongqing. In Chongqing, my father had a job, Deputy Chief of Air Defense. Whoever lived through the war will remember this: air raids, and more air raids. So that was a very important job for my father. Chongqing is a mountainous town. We lived in a house, we shared the 2nd floor with another family and the tenants underneath us. We were located direct across from the government building, maybe half a mile, I have no idea how far. But we could see the government building. In the morning, they raised the flags. In the evening, they took it down. And from the year 1941 to 42, the Japanese raided Chongqing more than 260 times. That's about every day. Sometimes we spend nights in the shelter. And sometimes the airplanes just keep on coming. You drop your bombs, you return, and come again, the second wave. And they were incendiary, so houses burned. They dropped not just on important factories, it just haphazard, because they could. At that time, of course, we must remember the flying tigers. For the life of me, I don't know why flying tiger looks like a shark. General Chennault, upon request from Madame Chiang Kai-shek, decided to organize a group of American volunteers and came. And they built the Myanmar road in order to get supplies into China because the coast was blocked. And it was great help to China. It was there maybe for a year or so. My beautiful dress, and my mother even knitted the pants for my brothers. I don't want that yet. So because there were so many air raids and the destruction was unimaginable. So sometimes when you want to sound the siren, it didn't work. My father, being the chief, deputy chief there, so he invented something called the balls. What it is actually it's like a flagpole with a horizontal bar on the top, sort of like a cross. When you sense the Japanese airplanes are on their way, one red ball would go up, telling everybody, run. When they're on top of us, another ball. When you see two red balls, you should stop running, you should be hiding somewhere already. Until the airplanes leave, then a green ball would go up. And I remember the green balls were not rounded, it was a cylindrical, sort of like a lantern. And that was my father's invention, because sometimes not everything was just working right. And one day, we went to my father's shelter. Is also his office. Very nice, with a bulb, planked floor, a kitchenette, because sometimes he spent nights in the shelter. That was very nice. But one day, we came back during school. We came back, we found fire on top of our house. It was not bad because it was quickly put out. But the next day, we found a huge, gigantic hole between the government building and our building. The Japanese missed the government building. In 1941, there was disaster. 4,000 people in the shelter. The Japanese dropped a bomb, sealing the entrance. All of them suffocated. It was disastrous. My father's boss was fired, and my father was fired. But they know a good thing. When they see one, they want my father to stay on. I don't know why he didn't stay on. Maybe he felt bad. Maybe it just was time for him to move on. So we decided to move. I remember we left Chongqing in a military truck, typical one like here, with a canvas top. You sit alongside with the luggage in the middle. We climbed the mountains and went from Chongqing to Luoyang. Luoyang is not too far from Kaifeng, where I was born. From here, we climbed mountains and went to Luoyang. I was in 3rd grade. Here in America, when you move, you sort of wait till the school finishes and then get a job and then buy the house before school starts. During the war, you go in April and you have to run in November. So it doesn't matter when, you just got picked up. So I was in 3rd grade. By the time I got to Luoyang, I was in 3rd grade. We live in a typical Chinese house. Typical Chinese house is squarish with rooms along 4 sides. The one facing south, which is the good ones, we had a living, dining, family room in the middle. 2 bedrooms, one for my parents, but I don't remember my father was ever there. And the kids in 1 room, not heated, dirt floor. In the winter, it was very cold. We used the coal, it's just like you put some coal in the wok and sit that in the middle, everybody's in the middle. In the wintertime, you put something over, like a dome, the things you dry your clothes over the fire, so also you get some moisture. And you see, you notice the window, no glass. We didn't have glass. There was a courtyard with a well in the middle. For those who's been Peabody Museum, you know that there's a Chinese house there, and you have to pay extra to see that house. I went there with friends. I said, I don't want to pay extra to see the house. I lived in one just like that. Maybe even bigger, because the courtyard was bigger. And we did not have clock. I remember asking the chef. We always had a cook. I guess in China, labor was cheap. So even though we were not so rich, but we always had 7 servants and maids, I would ask the chef, what time is it? He'd look up the sunset, 4:30, and it would be 4:30. He knows how to tell time. So in Luoyang, again, sirens. I was in 3rd grade, and in that particular school, there was no shelters. The shelters over the schoolyard and the ditches under the trees. Whenever the siren sounds, all the kids start running. One day, I ran halfway. The Japanese airplanes were on top of us. I heard machine guns, but I was not shot, fortunately. We reached the trenches and hid there. Another day, somebody in my class made a sound. And another kid said, the siren! Everybody jumped up. Do you know what that sound was? That shows how tense we were. We don't hear the sound, it's the siren. But these are all true stories. I didn't make it up. So before long, we didn't stay there long. We moved on to Xi'an. This is Luoyang. And this is Xi'an. Xi'an, of course, is famous now with the terracotta. It was an ancient capital of many dynasties. Chinese civilization started there. We moved there. This time, again, my mother, I said she would make a great general. She did everything with 5 kids by herself. And she did not finish military school. We borrowed a house. I guess maybe we had friends. We borrowed a house. A rich merchant let us use the house in his backyard. This house is much improved because we had glasses, no electricity, kerosene lamps, but the floor is polished cement. Outhouse, of course, no indoor facilities. Again, it's a large room in the middle. On one side, we had 3 bedrooms. My family. On the other side are the servants and maids. We always had servants and maids because in China, sometimes people would work for room and board. If you give them food and let them live, they're happy. I remember this. We had a well, but that water was called bitter water because full of minerals. We had to buy sweet water every day, just like here, way back, whoever remembers, milk was delivered to your house in the mornings. And sweet water was delivered to us. The kitchen, Chinese kitchen, is never part of the house. It's another building or just a shed outside of the house. We had a stove with a bellow, and for salt, I remember that the chef, you had rock salt, no Morton salt. Rock salt, but it's filled with debris. You put that in the bowl, water, it dissolves, and you use the salty water to season the food and throw away the dirt later on. For ironing, it's like double thickness of a sponge, about that size, a piece of iron with an iron handle, and at the end is a wooden handle. You put that on the stove, you heat it up. On the side, you have a dirt rag, wet. And you take the iron out, you go, tss, you see the string, tss, again, until the steam stop talking, the coming out, so that you know it's the right temperature to do your ironing. And that was a very good house. And we hired a servant. We hired a servant to pull me and my two younger brothers, because we were in second, third, and fourth grade, to school in the morning. Chauffeur, but except it's not a car. He would send us to school, and after school, he would pick us up. And of course, there was air raids. For one period, the Japanese came every single night. I don't know what time. It's always after dark. Maid servants would wake us up, says, let's run. My mother never wanted to get up. She said, oh, they won't kill me. I told you she's a good general. So the servants would take us to the shelter. At that time, the shelter is a hole in the city wall. The city wall was very thick. We would walk over there, half asleep, and you sit on the damp mud. And we would drift off, and after, I don't know for how long, then they said, okay, the airplanes are gone, we can go home every night. This way, students cannot concentrate to study. Workers cannot pay attention to what they're doing. It lasted a while until American fighters came to our rescue. I remember that very well. No. At that time, my father was fighting. He was fighting communists one side and fighting the Japanese another side. And then he was not always home, but one day, one summer day, he was home. We were sitting outside. It was a hot day. What we do, we pour cold water on the ground to cool it off. And the phone rang. Usually people don't have phones, but my father had one because of his job. And he went in, answered the phone, he came back, he said, the Japanese surrendered. You don't know how people feel unless you're one of them. I was young. I was very happy. We don't have to run anymore. The Japanese are going away. But can you imagine my parents' generation or my grandparents' generation, how they felt? Yes, it is time to go home. But where is home? What has become of our homes? Are my parents still there, or are they killed? I could not imagine that. At that time, I did not understand. All I know is we were very happy that night, and we said, how, why? Japanese surrendered. Well, my father said, atomic bombs. What is atomic bomb? It's something very small, but extremely powerful. How small? Oh, maybe like an apple. We had no idea what atomic bomb was like, but we were very happy. That night, we all went out to the streets. We saw American soldiers driving jeeps and yelling, "Ding hao, ding hao." That means very good, very good. That's all they know how to say, maybe. But everybody was very happy. My father left to his new job in Beijing. See, from Xi'an, he went to Beijing first to report to his job. He was deputy chief of police of Beijing City and air defense. Maybe he didn't have to defend too much. Now the war's over, but the police work, he went there first. My mother settled everything, but maybe because we could not get the airplane ticket, so she brought my two brothers, older, younger one first. After a few months, she came back to get us. That was the first time I got on an airplane, and it was a military airplane. For those who's been a military airplane, you don't sit like this. You sit slanted, and it was not pressurized. It was not heated, but we were happy to leave Xi'an. And well, I just saw a picture. This is a cave dwelling. While in Xi'an, most of our friends, most of us live in regular buildings, but I did visit a cave dwelling. This particular one is just a hole. You dig a gigantic hole in the ground, and then you make the tunnel, like half tunnel there. There are 2 rooms. The back is just a bed, built a stage like everybody sleeps on it, with a curtain to divide the front and the back. The front because there's window and there's a door, and so you have lights, so that's your living area. Kitchen is not in there, and there's no plumbing, of course. So this is just one I want to show you. This is another one, as you can see. It is underground. And sometimes when your family gets too big, you can have 2 holes, you can have 2 caves. And this is $1 million cave dwelling. This is so much nicer, so much neater. This is the year 1945. My father left, and my mother stayed with us. 1946, a year later. So we did not leave Xi'an right away because it took time. I just want you to compare the 45, 46 pictures. See my mother now in 46, she's in high heels and a nice dress, but here is still padded. In northern China, where it's very cold, people wear padded, cotton padded things. My mother's from the south. She hated, she said, they look so ugly because you look kind of fat. Then we went to Beijing. Now we're living. My father has a job. He bought himself a Buick with a chauffeur, and the chauffeurs clean the car every day. Wouldn't let my brothers in the car because he says boys are dirty, but he would let me sit in the car. My father built a beautiful house with a polished cement floor, and we even have a cellar duct and with central heating. Central heating meaning we hired somebody. His job is to put coal in the furnace so that we would have heat in the winter. So it was very lovely life, and I went to school. But what I found was I was so behind compared to my classmates. I was in the 2nd semester in the 6th grade. I didn't know anything, even though the local kids, the Peking kids, were under Japanese occupation, but they had a steady education from 1st grade to 6th grade. But I went to 4 elementary schools. I didn't learn anything, and I didn't know I didn't learn anything until I went to Beijing. I found, oh my goodness, they know everything I didn't know. But that's why I didn't understand why when I was in junior high, after we were settled, I overheard the teacher pointing to me, said to another teacher, that kid is smart. I never thought I was smart because I was stupid. I didn't know anything compared to the local kids. I think it's because I really didn't have a good foundation. We were in Beijing, 46. Then I started to hear communists. We didn't know what it was until adults start talking, says, are we going to run? Are we going away? I heard the rich people go to America. The middle one goes to Hong Kong. The poorer one goes to Taiwan. I guess the real people who really have land or something, or thinking that communists will not do anything bad to us, so they did not move. So in 1948, we left Beijing. My father didn't move because he's got his job. My mother again took us on a military plane and flew to Taiwan. So that was in 48. November 48, we went to Taiwan. We could not take anything except what we could wear. My mother made us wear things for 2 reasons. One, it's very cold in an airplane. And the other one is you take what you can. So I got 3 layers or something. I could hardly put my arms down. And we took whatever jewelry, cash, what we could. So we went to Taiwan. 1948, I was in Taiwan already. I was in junior high. 49, that's a uniform. This is way later. 2005. We are so lucky. We are so blessed. Both my husband and I always remind ourselves how lucky we are. We have children, 3 children, 6 grandchildren. This was 10 years ago. Now all these kids are much older and taller now. When I first came here to the Veterans Talk, I heard, some of you may remember, there was Mike, a young man called Mike, and he talked about airplanes. It was a P-109, someone remember? At the end of his lecture, he said, people of my generation could never pay the debt we owe to our veterans. I agree with him totally. I also would like to add, people of my generation, maybe just 10 years younger than the veterans, owe the veterans so much. We could never pay them. The veterans of China, the country in which I was born, and the veterans of the United States, a country I love, and I pledge my allegiance. Thank you very much. Yes.
Psychologically, how do people deal with stress?
You know, I have a feeling, I may be wrong, the Chinese are very, what's the word?
Resilient.
Yes, we take a lot more. I say we, I'm referring to them, me. Right now, I'm not we, okay? Yes, you take it when you have to. I have seen documentaries in the past few years. You see, I remember seeing the story. A woman was being interviewed. She just very calmly said, I was running, I gave birth to my baby girl, and I had to leave her there. I had no milk. I could hardly walk. How could I carry her? That would kill you. But when your life like that, you just have to keep on going, moving, resilient. You have no choice.
What was the question?
Take more.
What was the question?
How do psychologically people, I'm sorry, I should repeat the questions from now on. The Chinese people deal with it. That's why I said the Chinese people are resilient. When you have to, you have to. When you have no choice, you just have to take it.
And we've got a mic, so if you the next question, we'll hand you the mic.
May I ask, what are your feelings towards the Japanese these days?
Very good question. May I ask how a Jewish person feels towards the Germans?
Not easier.
I have Jewish friends who cannot forget or forgive. Personally, I could not. I'm being honest. I realize I have some Japanese friends who are the nicest people. It's not their fault. But as I said, because I was preparing for this talk, I read, Googled and all that. I'd say, why? People forget. People remember the Holocaust. And at the end of the war, we all know what ended the war, the American bombs. But almost 20 million Chinese civilians and 6 million military, 4 million military personnel perished. Why? 20 million. The Germans apologized to the world. The Japanese, never. They changed history to suit their purpose, and that is wrong. We have to face history. It is not always to perpetuate the hatred between two people, but it's also to remember we mustn't let this happen again. We mustn't.
In your talk, you told us you got the news the Japanese had surrendered. And immediately, I'll bet everybody here remembered where they were when they got the news, too.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember very well that my mother said, "You don't have to go to school tomorrow." At 10 years old, that's why I said I could not feel what my grandparents felt. It is, in one sense, it's done. We're going home. But then you think, where is home? How is home? Who is home? And that's frightening.
Yes, the Japanese to this day also will not admit any fault or atrocities in Korea either.
Yes.
Same as with China.
Yes, that's why the Koreans
Yes.
are also demanding.
And also on the comment you made about forgetting, my brother was on the battleship. What's that?
People can't hear you.
Oh, thank you. My brother was on a battleship in Pearl Harbor when the Japanese attacked, and he went through many kamikaze attacks and was through the whole war in the South Pacific. And to this, he's 93 now, and to this day he has never bought a Japanese car.
We never drove a Japanese car. We're very patriotic. We drive Ford.
Okay, somebody from over here.
I would like to make a comment about the flying tiger, because in mainland China, many people didn't know what's shark. You know, inland people, they never see ocean, so they don't know what's shark. The only thing they know is tiger. There are lots of mountains. So the American airline flight to come to see air tiger, the most flying tiger Chinese accept. The other one, a response to the gentleman, how brutal Japanese. 1969, I get a part-time job at a Coney Island Hospital in Brooklyn, New York. The secretary met me. First question, she's a Jew. Her husband is a rabbi. She asked me, Chinese or Japanese? I said, I'm Chinese. I was puzzled. Usually Korean ask, are you Japanese or you're Chinese? Make a difference. Then he said, oh, I'm glad that you are Chinese. Otherwise, I would refuse to talk to you. She was 13, ran away from Nazi persecution, ended up in Shanghai. And after Japanese invaded Shanghai, the Japanese soldiers paraded. All the Chinese has to bow. She didn't understand. She was short. She just tipped her toe because people lined up Japanese, very arrogant and walked through. All of a sudden, she was bayoneted by a Japanese soldier because she didn't bow. She said, I was 13. That's it.
There's a question.
Hi, Sophia. I'm just curious about your father. You never told us what happened to him, or...
Oh, okay. In 1948, we left first to go to Taiwan. When the communists actually came outside of Beijing, he left. He left, and when he was in Taiwan, actually, I didn't realize then, he was only 51 years old, or 50 years old. And I understand that the government asked him to serve again. For whatever reason, political or something, he said, no, I've done for my country, enough for my country. So he refused to accept any job. And being a general, he want no money in Taiwan, so he started business. Generals are not good business people. So we lost money. My mother was very mad. Not only he lost our money, because the investors, friends, so friends were mad at him. He can't be a businessman. He's just not a good businessman. So it was tough at that time when we first went to Taiwan. But fortunately, in Taiwan, public schools are good and cheap. So we were able to go to school without much trouble. And at that time, he was elected to be a member to the assembly, like the Congress. And there's no pay, but they give you coal, rice, and food stuff. So we managed. In the beginning, it was a little bit tough. I want to tell you how tough. While in Beijing, we had a furnace man, gardener, doorman, butler, upstairs maid, downstairs maid, a cook. When we went to Taiwan, we only had 3. That's how bad it was. No. Actually, we always had a cook. But later on, the maid left, no money. And the butler wanted to go. The butler followed us. I remember him being a household member all my life. Then he told my mother, I can't work for you for nothing anymore. So he left to work for an American as a cook. So my mother let him go. So my brother's cook, I didn't like to cook. So I did the dishes. So there was, and we hired a maid to come and do the laundry for us. And eventually we only had 1 shift. So that's how bad. But Chinese labor at that time was cheap. Yes.
There's a wonderful on the Japanese, the feeling toward the Japanese. I was 14 when the war ended, but there's a wonderful, is it okay now? Yeah, I'm ready, anyway. On YouTube, and it's a 5-minute and 20-second talk by a man named Jerry Yellen, and it's called, I flew the last mission in World War II, which in fact he did, out of Iwo Jima to Japan. He lost it. Well, anyway, and then he continues on talking, and then he talked about his feelings now. Anyway, I was the last combat mission in World War II, and then he said the very, very moving thing. He said in 1993, my youngest son married a Japanese girl that he met in college. And he said, now 3 of my grandchildren are Japanese. And the mother of these 3 little grandchildren, the grandfather was a kamikaze pilot who survived. So he and Jerry Yellen have talked about this sort of thing. But it's very, very, very moving. It puts a different perspective on things. Children are children and all that. Anyway, he was the last combat mission in World War II, and it's on YouTube. Thank you.
I do have a question, but before I do that, I'm standing here doing the math, and I'm looking at you, and you certainly don't look old enough to have gone through what you've gone.
Does anybody know when I was born?
80 years old.
1936.
Today.
Yeah.
Oh!
Happy birthday.
You see, when I was born, we used lunar calendar. I was born on August 2nd. You know the lunar calendar, lunar Chinese New Year's, it moves all around. So that drives me and my friend Joyce crazy. She says, when exactly is your birthday? Because she never knows. And this year I looked up, August 2nd is September 14th. So I'm 70 now.
It's your 10th anniversary of being 70. But I do have a question important in my mind about your father. About 25, 30 years ago, we had a businessman from Beijing stay at our house. He was here for navigation instruments at Hampstead Airfield, but he needed a place to stay. The last night when he left, he had his servants come in and give us an authentic Chinese meal. And I learned that night how to properly eat a dumpling, which was interesting. But I did learn that an owner of a business over there in Beijing, even if it's 1 in the morning, if one of his employees has a problem, they can come to his house and they'll sit down, have tea, and discuss it. Is that something the generals would do with their military personnel under them back at that time?
I would not know the real situation. All I know is since I was brought up in that household, everything to me is yes or no. You say yes is fine, you say no, you get shot. So it's very strict. My father was very strict. Nothing wishy-washy. He has very bad temper. So does my mother. So when they found out that I have such a bad temper, my mother said, can't help it. Both your parents have bad temper. So that's my excuse why I explode. So often, I do have hot temper. Larry can tell you. He suffered for 56 years. Oh yes, George. Oh, sorry.
Do you think that the mainland Chinese will allow the Taiwan to remain, in effect, independent? And how aggressive do you think China will be in the South China Sea?
Okay, I'll refer that question to my husband, who may be more into it. Can you answer?
I think so long the word independent is not mentioned. Taiwan is in fact independent from China. They do whatever they want and so forth, conduct their own affairs. Yeah. Well, I mean, Taiwan is in fact a separate country almost. But so long that word is not mentioned, it's okay. The mainland will tolerate that. And in fact, the relationship, commerce between the two, Taiwan and the mainland, is very intimate, lots of connections. So I don't think a war will ever recur again. And in fact, the name of Chiang Kai-shek is now gaining ascendance in China. People said was very complimentary of his war of resistance against Japan and so forth. Otherwise, the Communist Party would not have been able to survive with the last 8,000 men. So I think it's, it's like East-West Germany or so forth. In time when the economic situation become favorable, they will unite. But right now, de facto, there's two countries on very friendly terms. And there are, for example, in the past May, we were in China, and we were, some of the older ones may remember in the 60s and 70s, there was cannon war between an island called Quemoy and mainland China. Matsu, yeah. No, Matsu is another island. This is the more famous island, Quemoy and Kinmen. Kinmen and Quemoy. They're only a ferry ride of 20 minutes apart, and they will have daily cannon war between the two. And now they're very friendly, and a ferry ride every hour. You can go from one country to another. You need a visa to come back like us, but otherwise, a very busy commerce, and the things are doing very well. So I don't think there will ever be military conflict between the two anymore.
George?
You've given some indication of how grim the circumstances are with the Japanese. Can you comment at all on how grim it was or was not as the communists took over after the Japanese surrendered?
Well, after the communists took over, in the beginning, everybody was for China until the Cultural Revolution, and the Mao Zedong was getting senile, and his wife is getting more powerful. And then things started to become bad. The Cultural Revolution was just devastating, so stupid. It really put China back. When I went back, I left China in 1948. When I went back for the first time in 81, I noticed, like most of my friends, that China did not change. Things did not get any better. The whole world moved up. China stayed behind like 30 years. I was devastated because when you see your mother country like that, well, the whole world is like that. I got so depressed, I came home, I couldn't do anything. And until my daughter, who was in college, she said, "Mom, you cannot think like a Chinese. You are not there. You're here. You have to carry on your life as an American here. If you keep on thinking what they don't have, each one has two shirts. One is on you, the other one is on the line." I mean, the situation is so bad. I was very depressed for a long time because it was bad. But however, that's it. In the past 30 years, nobody can believe China can come up like this. It was a great, great effort and very successful. No, successful in certain sense, but not.
Were there a significant number of lives lost in that transition when the communists took over?
What lost?
Lives lost.
I know that in America, the Civil War or the Pearl Harbor, or that Civil War lost the most people. I don't know, I don't have the figures, but I can guess sometimes maybe it could be true. But cannot be over 20 million like the Japanese killed the Chinese.
We probably have time for one or two more questions, if we have any. Am I missing anyone? Sir.
I just want to make a quick comment. It's a very nice talk. Thank you very much, Sophia, and our friend. I believe I'm 2 or 3 years senior of you.
Yeah.
I also grew up in Chongqing and spent my childhood in Chongqing. So my comment is about a particular point. Sophia showed that picture of the mentioned that 30,000 people died during the air raid because the entrance was sealed. But in fact, actually, it was different because I was older, so I knew the details. The real reason was that when the siren came, the people outside the guard would knock up the entrance door. But then when they opened it, everybody wanted to rush out because of knock of air. But unfortunately, the door was designed to open from the inside. So the people at the gate pushed the door, and the door could never open. Now everybody in the tunnel, we call it tunnel, 大隧道, was killed, died. So from that on, I always pay attention. If you go to any building in this country, you would notice the front door opens out. Now it's open inside. And at that time, I think China was so poor, people didn't have knowledge. And that incident may also have contributed to why your father was dismissed afterwards.
Hey, I tell you that the reason all the doors open out is because in Cleveland, in 1931, the Collinwood High School had a fire, and the doors opened inward, and a lot of kids died. So it became a national law, the doors have to open out.
Yeah, smart, yeah.
I asked one question. You talked about bitter water.
Beg your pardon?
You
Oh,
spoke
bitter
about
water,
bitter
yes.
water. Did you ever collect rainwater? They do in many parts of the world.
In southern China, it rains. In northern China, in the desert, it don't rain no more. No, because it's very dry, arid. Desert. In northern part, oh, here, this is all desert. This is Gobi Desert. And my father's from northern China. And the story has it, a person bathes 3 times a year.
I think it's life, not a year.
No, a life. A life. When you're born, when you get married, when you die. Because there's no water. And it doesn't rain. And you do collect rainwater, but it doesn't rain that much. I remember my mother is from a fertile southern state. When she went back to my father's homeland, she came back, said, oh, they're so poor, so dirty, so dusty, so everything. That's why she knitted sweaters for us, because she thinks northerners wear those padded things, bulky, and you don't wash them, by the way. You cannot wash padded cotton. It won't dry, it will just mat. So they're filthy because there's no water. Yeah, you can collect. Well, you do collect sometimes, but northern China is poor. This is rich. Another thing is the Chinese rivers always flew from the west to the east, which the 2 Yellow River and the Yangtze River. That drawback, unlike our Mississippi, it carries goods from the north to the south, vice versa. But the Chinese goods goes from, it's useless. That's why canal was built. It's trying to get the products up and down, exchange product. And that's the great Mississippi is so good for us, while the Chinese rivers are not so
I might just add a little bit more information about how bad things are and were very recently. Our daughter in 1995 to 1997 served in the Peace Corps, and she was stationed right in Outer Mongolia. And then, of course, the water is very scarce. I mean, you have every day for drinking water, you have to go about a mile to lug it back to your tent called yurt. You live in. And when we went to China, and she came to Beijing to visit us, and she had an outer coat, of course, had to be washed for a year. And people in Beijing couldn't believe how dirty it was because there's no water. And things in Beijing, of course, improved a lot. But in Outer Mongolia, things were still bad. And that was as recent as 10, 15 years ago when she was serving the Peace Corps.
Well, and in the desert, it doesn't rain.
I'm sure, Sophia will be delighted to stay afterwards and answer any questions that you did not get around to asking now. So let's give Sophia a great big hand of thanks.